I talk about a lot of pop culture and video games, genre culture. I try to avoid the term nerd. But what you may not know is that I actually have a very big interest in science, technology, futurism, and history. And I feel like, especially when it comes to space sciences, and that's obviously going to be influenced a lot by my interest in things like Star Trek and, to a lesser extent, Star Wars, but sci fi in general really gets me there. But ever since I was a young child, questioning things and looking for answers and wanting to know why was like ingrained in me. I was homeschooled and I was taught to think. I was taught to absorb information and then question things and try to solve things. I wasn't taught how to beat tests. So when it comes to science, especially in the modern world, I find myself quite disappointed in how things currently work. And honestly, how they've worked for a good while now. But it's just become more and more obvious to me over time. To the space science part, growing up, I watched innumerable documentaries on PBS and read many, many books. There was programs on PBS. There was one called Stephen Hawking's Universe that went through from quantum physics, the Big Bang, where it was all going. Like, it covered so many subjects. And not only that, but just the history of it all. The different characters throughout history that came up with these concepts and what they went through to prove them and to challenge the status quo. Imagine if we didn't have the bravery to challenge the concept of essentially the universe orbiting the Earth. But those were things people did back then, sometimes at great cost themselves. And those were some of the lessons that, for instance, in Stephen Hawking's universe, that were taught was that science is constantly challenging and questioning preconceived notions, theories, what the academia puts out there. All these things should be questioned. Because if you're not questioning and if you're not constantly testing and challenging these things, you're not doing science. Science is not supposed to be a dogma. Science is supposed to be the process of repeating, and getting the same conclusions over and over again. And then when you have new information to put into that test, you put the new information in and you go, wow, with this new information, the test doesn't hold up. We've got to change our theory. We've got to change the established norm. And I feel like I'm pretty decently informed on many of these subjects. I'm very self-educated on science. Read many novels, read many books like Michio Kaku's Hyperspace, Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. I indulge all the time in YouTube. There's a channel I really like called SEA, or SEA_space is the actual link. PBS Space Time. There's Anton Petrov. But I just on a consistent basis keep myself up to date with these things. I love reading articles about space and science, and even if I can't fully grasp, obviously on the level of some professor or teacher, things about quantum physics and reality and all that, I feel like when you immerse yourself enough in these concepts, you really do begin to learn a lot about them and expand your mind. And I try to do that as much as possible. I love science. I love the process of learning and testing what I believe I've learned to see if it continues to be true. And I feel like in the current world, we have completely lost that entire part of science, what science is. I was watching a short the other day on SEA's channel. I believe it was a short. It may have just been an older video. But the short basically talked about how James Webb, the new space telescope, had observed these galaxies and these stars, for instance, that are so old that it changes the timeline, if true, that we believe for the development of the universe. It's supposed to be 13.7, whatever billion years old. And we have these certain, processes that we believe took place to form stars and then eventually galaxies. And if you're observing galaxies so far back, it breaks that process and you go, wow, these galaxies were forming a lot sooner than we thought. But you also have to consider that there's also just a physical time frame for things to occur, for things to develop and to happen. Things in space just don't happen very rapidly throughout the universe. It's a very long and slow process. However, instead of accepting that, okay, our time scale is wrong, for some reason, we keep finding that we bump up against that 13.7 billion years. We never challenge that because established dogma in the community and academia says, nope, those are the tests we did. That's what it says. 13.7 billion years old is when the universe began at the Big Bang, etc., etc. Instead of every time we find new evidence that something is older than that time frame or is very close to that age and therefore challenges the process of these things coming to be, we don't go, well, this keeps happening. Maybe our timeline is wrong. What if there's more to this? We never let it challenge this concept of the age of the universe, for instance. They will always find some loophole or way to go around it and change instead of changing their theory based on the observation. They will assume that there's something wrong with the observation to preserve the theory. And that's what really bothers me. There's a star out there called Methuselah. You can look it up. It's the Methuselah star. And their studies show that this star is older than the assumed age of the universe, something like 14.4 billion years old. And of course, this is just another thing we find that challenges that age of the universe. Well, we've got these developed galaxies way earlier in time than we thought, and that doesn't make sense because it takes time for this to happen. There must be something going on that we don't know about, or maybe your estimation of the age of the universe is incorrect. Well, we've discovered this star that is like 1 billion years older than the universe. That's not possible. There's got to be something wrong with this observation. There's got to be some other phenomenon at play. Or maybe your timeline for the age of the universe is wrong. Like, once something becomes so entrenched in the scientific dogma, we stop doing science. Because every time we see one of these things occur, we should be challenging the theory. Now, the comment that I would mention, the comment was somebody responding to someone else, and they say, yeah, that's called science. We have to continually test the observation to disprove it versus throwing out an established theory. That was the comment I read. I used better language than they did, but that's what they said. And of course I respond to it, and I'm like, you realize this is literally the opposite of how science works. When you observe new things, you constantly take that observation as a challenge to your theory. If you can't challenge theory to potentially prove it wrong, you're not doing science. And so it really, in a lot of ways, besides just, I feel like, making a lot of our theories about space and the development of the universe and the development of time and all these other observations we're making, not only does it bring into question what is the accuracy of these things. If we're gonna do this about the age of the universe, why are we so stuck on that? Why not let that be challenged? What if we discover we're wrong? That would be okay. It's not as if that means you discovered God or something. It just means that you miscalculated the age of the universe. It's okay. We can do that. That might even be exciting, And that's the other part of it too, is we will consistently have these things come up these detections of some signal from somewhere, and I'm not even referencing, aliens or UFOs. I just mean like some phenomena in the galaxy or the universe. And we will almost always present it to the public. It sounds really interesting, and then immediately basically tell the public, but don't get too excited, it's probably just something mundane. Well, boom, there you go. You just killed all potential interest in your subject. The scientific community, for the most part, in this country and around the world, unless you're part of a private enterprise, you're basically funded by the government, by the taxpayer. And the times where you have an opportunity to put something out there that's intriguing and is of interest, capture public, attention, and you basically immediately turn around and shoot yourself in the foot. I'm not saying like go make things exaggerated or over the top extraordinary sounding, but don't immediately write off everything of interest as some boring crap. Because you're like, I do it all the time, and I'm somebody who's really interested in these things already. I'm somebody who will literally just go to sleep at night with YouTube videos about space and quantum physics and stuff playing. But even I will see a headline or see a video, and it'll be some interesting new possible discovery or thing that was picked up or whatever, and within a few minutes, the commentator, and this is for instance, and I'm not trying to call the person out or talk down about them or anything, but Anton Petrov, the guy gives really fantastic videos with really good information, and it's interesting to watch his channel. However, he's kind of one of those people too who they give you that spark of interest, some really cool new thing, and then they immediately temper the expectations. It's like, bro, just let us enjoy it. Just let us think that there's some mystery out there in the universe, and maybe we stumbled across something that could be really interesting. The fact is, we know very little to almost nothing about our universe. Everything we know is not a directly observed phenomenon. Outside some visual, telescopes and some direct detections. Most of the things we have is extrapolations, assumptions about things. And I know the power of math to solve things. I don't think I'm ill-informed about these things, and I don't know about it. But there does come a point where you have to realize everything we are told about the universe and about space and things that are going on out there is filtered through this lens of, we have this satellite dish that detected a whole bunch of radiation or some signals or whatever, and based on that and where it came from in the sky, we've extrapolated this. But we also still actually don't know, at all. And that should be the interesting part. That should be the part that we go, oh my God, we got all this really cool stuff out here. We just don't know what's happening. Let's figure it out. But every time something really cool comes along that could capture interest and get the public engaged, because if you want the funding for these things, if you want to pique the imagination of future scientists and people who want to get into these fields and make new discoveries, stop acting like every new discovery is probably just some mundane crap. It's probably just some form of supernova, or it could be some really crazy thing that we have no idea what it is. So just a combination of things have had me kind of down on the entire subject lately. Both the fact that we over temper expectations because we don't want people to get excited, I guess, and believe there could be some mystery out there that we don't know about. And on the other end of it, we don't seem to allow new observations to challenge theory. It's like it has to go through, the theory protection department or something like that. I don't know. It's just disappointing to me. I've rambled a little too long about it, but those are my thoughts. I feel like science can be far more, especially space science. This is the one that particularly gets my imagination. It could be far more engaging to the public. And at the same time, it needs to constantly challenge itself. I want to see a major scientist or a major group or study that comes out and says, hey, you know what? We keep finding all this evidence that our calculations of the age of the universe are wrong. So we're going to look into that further. We're going to do more testing and more studies and surveys and look for more answers on that. Instead of saying, well, no, this is how old the universe is, so whatever we're observing here, the observation must be wrong. It's not science.